Thank you all for joining us here at I-80 Sports, where today we continue our 32-part 2021 team previews. Today's team, the Calgary Flames. Thank you all for joining us here at I-80 Sports. Thank you all for joining us here at I-80 Sports. Make sure you check out our website down below, i80sports.com, for all of our team previews and NHL content. And if you're joining us here on YouTube, you can find all of our team previews here as well. While you're here on YouTube, drop a like, comment, and subscribe for all of our team previews coming up. And make sure you follow us on Twitter at I80_SportsNHL, where if you're not currently following us, we'd love for you guys to follow. And for those who are currently following, thank you guys so much because we very much value your support. I'm Brian. He's Tom. Tom, how are you doing today?
Doing well. So here we are, part 2 of 32, profiling the 1989 Stanley Cup champions, the only one they ever won, Calgary Flames.
And they could be looking to try to win one this year, but we're going to have to see where they go and see what their lineup looks like. So away we go. Let's first start by talking about some 2020 and 2021 team facts from this past 56-game season. So first and foremost, what was their record last year? The Calgary Flames were 26-27-3 last year. That's 26 wins to 27 losses to 3 overtime losses. They finished 5th in the NHL North Division, the Canadian division, that is. On the power play and the penalty kill, they didn't do too bad. They were relatively league average at both. On the power play, they converted the power play 18.29% of the time. That's league average on the power play. And on the penalty kill, they were slightly above average, 80.23% on the penalty kill. So not bad on all accounts. And their leading scorers for last year, we have Johnny Gaudreau, who led the team with 49 points. Johnny Hockey getting it done. Next was Elias Lindholm, only 2 points behind Johnny Gaudreau with 47 points. And Matt Tkachuk with 43 points. And for those that are keeping track at home, that's the projected first line this year. So not looking too bad there. So if they can continue that, that's not a bad-looking team. Now, what were some big additions and big subtractions this year? Well, we've got some relatively big additions with one relatively big subtraction. So, additions first. Let's talk about the good. Some big additions this year included Blake Coleman, Nikita Zadorov, Andy Welinski, Trevor Lewis, Dan Vladar, and Tyler Pitlick. And to me, Blake Coleman is probably the one that sticks out the most here. They shelled out quite a bit of money for Blake Coleman this year, coming from the Tampa Bay Lightning. And some subtractions. The biggest one here, of course, is former captain Mark Giordano, who was selected in the expansion draft by the Seattle Kraken. Other subtractions from the Calgary Flames include Louis Domingue, Derek Ryan, Josh Lavo, Michael Stone, Joachim Sorstrom, Dominic Simon, Buddy Robinson, and Zach Rinaldo. Really, the big subtraction here is Mark Giordano. That's the one that sticks out like a sore thumb. So it'll be interesting to see if Calgary really misses him this year or not. But let's move right along and talk about some X factors this year. When we talk about X factors, we talk about who is pivotal to the team's success or on the opposite side of things, their downfall potentially. So who are the most important figures right now? Tom, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to stop talking as usual once we get to this point because I've already said quite a bit. Who are some X factors in your mind? Who's going to be important to the Calgary Flames' success?
I think right now it starts with Matt Tkachuk. Assuming the players go to the Olympics this year, he's got a lot to prove. I know he's on USA Hockey's radar, but I don't know if he's a shoo-in. I think Johnny Gaudreau, definitely a shoo-in. Matt Tkachuk, I'm not so sure. And remember whose footsteps he's following. His father is Keith Tkachuk. For any USA Hockey fan on here, you know, that glorious time from the 91 Canada Cup to the 04 World Cup, Keith Tkachuk was part of a lot of big moments. And I think that's, something that's going to be, pushing him to play better, pushing him to have a good year, to make that appearance in the Olympics. And hopefully, it rubs off on Calgary and gets them back into the playoffs this year. Another guy here is Noah Hannafin. Somebody I didn't really think of at first, but then I was looking down the depth chart and I'm like, you know something? With Mark Giordano being gone, Noah Hannafin is now your number one defenseman. He's now a top pair guy. Noah Hannafin had a lot of fanfare coming out of BC in his draft year, and he really never lived up to it that much, to tell you the truth. So now it's his time. Now he's going to be the number one guy. Now he's going to get those top pair minutes. He may not play in the first power play unit, but he's going to be playing a lot more than he probably ever did. So it's up to Noah Hannafin to finally grab the bull by the horns and see if he can live up to the player he was projected to be.
Yeah, I completely agree there. And Noah Hannafin wasn't a guy that I thought of at first as well, but especially now that he has to step into Mark Giordano's footsteps and, the shoes that he leaves behind, it is going to be tough for him. I have a couple of guys who Calgary is going to rely on to navigate them to the playoffs this year. The first is one of their biggest stars, Johnny Gaudreau, Johnny Hockey himself. After coming off 2 somewhat below average years for himself, I would say look for Johnny Hockey to come back with a vengeance this year. He came pretty close last year with 49 points in 56 games, but I know he wants to capitalize even more on that. Next is Matt Tkachuk. Not only is he an expert agitator, but he's also a fantastic winger who will step into a leadership role this year, now with the absence of former captain Mark Giordano. Yeah, Matt Tkachuk, I think he's going to want to really prove that he is someone very different from his father in all good ways. Next to me is Blake Coleman, who was the hottest free agent acquisition for the Calgary Flames this year. After 2 great years in New Jersey and Tampa Bay, where he won 2 Stanley Cups with Tampa Bay, Blake Coleman will be stepping into a top 6 role with the Flames. Something that he really hasn't seen since playing in New Jersey. He brings versatility, grit, and a great scoring touch to the Calgary Flames and will want to live up to the contract that he just received. So a lot of pressure is going to be on him to perform. Lastly is goaltender Jacob Markstrom. Coming off a steady first season with the Calgary Flames after leaving Vancouver last year, Markstrom will want to impress this year and show why he was one of the best goaltenders in the Pacific Division, if not the NHL. Next, we're going to talk about some breakout star candidates. So who could potentially have a career year this year who hasn't really shined in the limelight just yet? So, Tom, in your mind, who's a breakout candidate?
Believe it or not, I'm going to have a reach here. And this is a guy who I was very high on in the draft last year, and is property of the Calgary Flames, hasn't really seen much time in the NHL yet, hasn't seen any time in the NHL yet. And that would be Connor Zary, believe it or not. With the uncertainty right now around Sean Monahan, whether they're going to keep him, whether they're going to dump him, there's rumors that they want to move him for another defenseman. With the uncertainty around him, if he's moved and Zary comes into camp and dazzles, I could easily see Zary slotting into that third line spot. And am I going to say he's going to have a breakout rookie year? No, but could I see Zary, maybe getting 30 points? Yeah, I think that could happen. So, I'm going to go with Connor Zary on this one.
Interesting pick. I still think Connor Zary might be a half a year to a year off, but who knows? If he impresses at camp, he could fit into a role right from opening night. For me, it was tough to pick a breakout candidate here, but I'm going to go out and say Dylan Dubé. The 23-year-old winger, though he does play a little bit of center too, played a more prominent role in last year's lineup, and he tallied 11 goals and 11 assists for 22 points in 51 games last year. And I'm expecting him to expand that role even more this year, where he could put up career numbers in what could be his first full NHL season. I think Dubé is a guy that some people have kind of written off just because of when he came in. He came in 2019, didn't play a full season, comes in 2020, absolutely doesn't play a full season because of all the craziness that happened. And then 2021 was a 56-game season where he played 51 games. So this could be his first real chance to put up, a career year. And I think Dylan Dubé could, in fact, do that. So now we're going to move on here to our potential opening night lineup. And the one thing to keep in mind here with our potential opening night lineup, this is just for opening night, not necessarily what the lineup could look like in February, March, because we're in August right now. A lot of things could change between now and October. And this is also coming from our opinion as well as other tidbits that we picked up from the internet and our own analysis and expertise. So let's get right into this right now. We're going to start with line one right here, right now. So starting off with forward line one, we're going from left to right here, from left wing, center to right wing. Starting off on line one, we've got Johnny Gaudreau, Elias Lindholm, who we didn't really talk about as much and really sneakily had a really good year last year and the year before, and is a guy that could honestly factor as an X factor on this team. And then lastly, at right wing, Matt Tkachuk. Moving on to forward line two, we have Andrew Mangiapane, Michael Backlund, and Blake Coleman. Next on line three, we've got Dylan Dubé, Sean Monahan, and Tyler Pitlick. And then on line four, we've got Milan Lucic, Trevor Lewis, and Brett Ritchie. Moving on to the defense. On defense line one, we've got Noah Hannafin paired with Chris Tanev. Next to the defense line two, we've got Nikita Zadorov paired with Rasmus Andersson. And then lastly on line three, we've got Juuso Valimaki with Oliver Shillington. And then to the goaltending, starting goaltender, as I alluded to before, Jacob Markstrom, and backup goaltender recently acquired Daniel Vladar. So of this, we're going to talk a little bit here about some variables. You know, how could this lineup change between now and October? How could things change throughout the year? Tom, I'll start with you. What are some things that you could see as variables in this lineup?
Well, a huge variable here is the future of Sean Monahan, to tell you the truth. He might be one of the best third-line centers in the league, if not the best. But like I said before, they're shopping him around. So whether he's there or whether he's not is going to really determine where this team goes, I think. I think that, yeah, it was a reach, what I said before with Zary. But if you bring him in and he does well, great. But then if you bring him in and he doesn't do well, then what do? Then you're left with Trevor Lewis and somebody from the AHL to possibly bring up. So I think it depends on what they want to do. Do they want to leave the D alone, and do they want to trust Noah Hannafin with that number one slot? Or do they want to move Monahan and somebody else to try and get like another top three defenseman in there? It's really, that's the biggest question mark with this Calgary team right now that I'm looking at. It's what they're going to do with Sean Monahan.
Yeah, and that's a very, very valid point. For me, variable-wise, number one, Blake Coleman. And nothing bad about Blake Coleman for those that might jump down my throat on this one. Nothing bad whatsoever. So though he signed to a top 6 level salary right now, making over $5 million per year, he's still going to play the role of a Swiss Army knife. There's going to be nights where he plays second line or first line minutes. There may be nights where he lines up on line 3 to start a game. You know, he's going to be a guy that could float throughout the lineup, and certainly not in a bad way, and it doesn't diminish his role whatsoever. He's going to be heavily relied on the penalty kill and could even see some power play minutes this year. One prospect to watch in camp is the number 26 overall pick from 2019, Jacob Pelletier. And if he impresses in training camp, he could also be in this opening night lineup, but Calgary may give him time to play consistently at the AHL level first. He is a guy that I think is pretty close to NHL ready, though. He could be a guy that forces himself into this lineup. Another variable to me is Milan Lucic. I know that Calgary, unfortunately, has some money invested in Milan Lucic after taking on his contract from Edmonton, but that doesn't mean he's going to play every night. He's going to be a guy that I will be a little bit surprised if he ends up getting 55 or 60 games this year. He could be a guy that he may factor in the opening night lineup, but maybe not much further than that. We'll just have to see as the season progresses. But as we wrap things up with the Calgary Flames right now, it's time to move on to our question of the day, which, for those keeping track at home, our question of the day for this series is simple. Where do the Calgary Flames finish in the standings in the Pacific Division? So, Tom, I'll start with you. Where does Calgary finish in the Pacific Division?
Well, like we have mentioned before, this is a weak division, but I think that the top 2 spots in this division are all but taken by 2 other teams, who I'm not going to mention right now. I'm going with 3rd or 4th here. I think it's going to be a dogfight between them and Vancouver. Despite Vancouver having a bad year last year, I think they will turn it around. And I do think at the end of the day, it's going to come down to the wire with them battling for either that third playoff spot in the division or jumping into a wild card spot and maybe having to potentially go over and play a Central Division winner in the first round of playoffs. So, yeah, I'm going with third or fourth. My definite answer you'll hear later on in the series because I have a lot to say about Vancouver when we get to them. And at the end of that episode, you'll hear why.
That's fair. And we're going to be talking about the Pacific Division this week as well as next week. We're doing 4 teams this week as well as 4 teams next week. So for those that are fans of any Pacific Division teams, we're talking about all of that this week and next week. But to me, I agree, Tom. The Pacific Division is a weak division this year, and Calgary is absolutely going to reap the benefit of that. This Calgary team, even with a weak Pacific Division team, Pacific Division in general, this Calgary team is a playoff team. You don't go out and sign Blake Coleman to the contract he got if you don't think that this team is a playoff team. Calgary's top line could produce some impressive numbers this year, and their depth at every position is impressive as well. Plus, Jacob Markstrom had a relatively strong year last year, but he will look to improve even more on that in his second year in Calgary. I'm going to tentatively say that the Calgary Flames will finish second place this year in the Pacific Division. There's one team in my mind that's the team to beat in this division, but we'll get to that when we get there. You'll just have to wait and see who that team is for me. But what do you guys think of the Calgary Flames? Do you agree with our analysis? Do you disagree with our analysis? Make sure that you comment down below and let us know. And while you're commenting down below, make sure you drop a like and subscribe for all of our team previews coming up. Maybe you're not a fan of the Calgary Flames, but that doesn't mean we're not covering your favorite team. So we're going to be moving from the West Coast to the East Coast, all leading up to October, to the beginning of the NHL season. So you want to make sure that you catch us here on YouTube as well as our website down below, iadsports.com, where you can find all of our team previews as well as all of our NHL content, our NFL, MLS, NCAA football, and NBA content there as well. Definitely make sure you check us out at iadsports.com. And if you've got Twitter, make sure that you follow us down below at I80_sportsNHL. For those that are currently following us already, thank you so much for all of your support, because we greatly value all the support that we have been getting throughout this series in general. But guys, it's time to pump the brakes here on the Calgary Flames and time to move on to a different team. So that being said, thank you all for joining us here at I80 Sports. I'm Brian. He's been Tom. This has been your Calgary Flames team preview.